The story of my small business can be summed up like this. Be careful what you ask for. Because I got exactly what I asked for, but not exactly how I imagined it. So I hope you've got some coffee or tea or an adult beverage, or maybe you're eating dinner right now, because this, I thought this was going to be like a 10-minute video, but it took me about 5 or 6 hours to piece all this together. I've got coffee and water, so I'm ready. Howdy everybody, my name is Abby. Welcome to a Type 9 Studio, where I give you tips on growing your Etsy shop or small business. So we're going to go through the beginnings of my business and how it started, how I started my Etsy shop, how I left a bad relationship in the middle of all of that, how I started a new relationship in the middle of all of that, and also without this business I would not have discovered something very important about myself that I will discuss more towards the end. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to try to be as thorough as I can, and I also want this to look back on myself so I can remember I don't have to do all this digging again. My interests change pretty often and I'm fairly impulsive, so I can never really answer that question. People ask, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in X amount of years, etc. I used to think that I enjoyed change because I would do it so much, but I learned the hard way that I don't actually like change, and I just wasn't able to focus on or stick to one thing at a time. I've had numerous traditional jobs, never for more than 2.5 years or so. I know I look young, but I have been of working age for over 10 years. I graduated high school in 2012 and graduated college in the fall of 2014. I went in for pre-med, I did 2 years of classes for that, and decided that I didn't want to do that anymore, so I switched to maybe trying accounting. So I took a few accounting classes, and I did not like that either. So at that point I had enough credits to get out with 2 associate's degrees, one in arts and one in sciences, and that was it for college. I don't know what possessed me to try accounting either. I've always liked helping people, and some missionary work that I'd done in the past kind of led me to medicine, but then I was like, wait, I don't really want to be a doctor for the rest of my life. So it's not that I didn't think I could do it, that wasn't something that sounded interesting to me anymore. So I left and saved myself a lot of money. So my business has been my full-time job for over 1.5 years now. I had originally planned to leave my last real job to live in a van full-time that I was going to renovate, and I wanted to solo travel the US, so good thing that didn't pan out for obvious reasons if you do some math there 1.5 years ago. My idea, I'll explain more about this later, but my idea was basically to be a digital nomad where I would be able to make money from any location just with a computer or my phone. I'm not like MLMs and stuff like that, but other things. So a remote job, freelancing, stuff like that. All of the research that I did for that, I suppose, wasn't a total waste. So going back to the very, very beginnings of the business, it all started with crochet. This is already I could, if you don't know me, I'm sure 99.9% of you don't know me already, so hello. So I grew up in eastern Kentucky in a little town called Prestonsburg. It is in Floyd County, you know how Kentucky, the edge of it is like this. There was a county here, and then ours was right there. So it's pretty out there in Appalachia. That's how I explain it to everybody. I'm like, okay, Kentucky's like this on the eastern side. There's a county here, and then ours is next to it. So I never really went to daycare or preschool or anything. I mostly stayed with my grandparents because my parents worked all the time. And I was an only child until I was 8 when my brother was born. So I stayed mostly with my mom's parents, and my grandma was the go-to lady if anybody in the family needed baby blankets or baby booties, things like that for, a baby shower. And my grandpa would be gone during the day because he mowed lawns for a living. So while he was gone during the day, I would be with her, and we would sit there and watch Days of Our Lives and Passions. If you were around in the late 90s, early 2000s, you'd probably remember that. But she would crochet while she was watching that, and then I eventually was kind of interested in what she was doing, and so I would watch her make blankets and whatever else she was making with those, and reading patterns on how to do it, and I was pretty interested in it. But I actually learned how to read from her, reading to me, before I even went to kindergarten. So I could read when I was maybe 3 or 4, but she also taught me how to crochet, so a few basic stitches. Well, I got up to turn the lights on and the sun came back. Alright, it's cloudy outside. And keep in mind, this is when I was in I may have been in elementary school at this point, first grade maybe. She gave me some scrap yarn that she had left over, and I made a few like blanket type things for my baby dolls, and that was about the extent of what I did with crocheting for a while. We moved here to the greater Cincinnati area when I was in 7th grade, which was around 2007. But I went to a craft store for the first time after we moved here. I think this was around 2008, 2009. We didn't have craft stores where I grew up, we just had Walmart. So I found the yarn section and remembered that I kind of remembered how to crochet. And then I found a book that had patterns for making amigurumi, which were really small crocheted like animals or dolls, characters, stuff like that. I ended up buying that book and making a few things from it. And I found some more books on amigurumi at the bookstore. And then finally discovered the world of crochet patterns on the internet. Like the website Ravelry has hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of crochet patterns, mostly for free. Over the next couple years, I made things off and on, sold a few things to my friends. I didn't realize that most things I made were like actually inside out and the stitching was really bad, but I was so happy that people were buying them from me, even for just, I think I charged $5 for one. So I was busy with school and stuff, so I kind of put that off until I got my own apartment in 2016. So I was with my ex-boyfriend at the time working at a call center for a bank, and I made pretty decent money, but quickly realized that I didn't have much extra after paying rent and bills. And around that time, I think actually even before that, I've had my makeup YouTube and a blog and everything since like 2012 or 2013. And I held on to hope for a long time that that would eventually be my job, to be like an influencer, but that didn't really pay off. But I suppose now it's helped me to do what I'm doing now. So anyways, moving on back to 2016. So I had some yarn and I was just making some things here and there, and I kept looking at Ravelry for new things to make. So I decided to open my Etsy shop on Small Business Saturday in 2016. So Small Business Saturday is the day after Black Friday. I'm just going to turn the lights on because it's getting dark, okay? So in 2016 I think I turned 21 in 2016. So I just took a few poorly lit photos of things that I had already made, like baby afghans and scarves, and a few amigurumi that I tried to like make my own pattern for because I was really cautious of not using someone else's pattern if they said that you couldn't sell things you made with it. So I just stuck all that stuff on Etsy and I called the shop A Street Crochet. So it was like A for Abby Street, A Street. I was very rushed with everything and didn't spend time making a name or a logo or branding or anything. So I didn't get any sales from Etsy for a while. I think a few people messaged me on Facebook to order things, like just people I knew, for Christmas gifts. I think I made a couple scarves as Christmas gifts for a family friend. But over 2 months later, after I started my Etsy shop, I got my first sale in February 2017. So someone messaged me because they liked one of the baby Afghans that I had on my shop, and they wanted me to make one in specific colors for their husband's armchair, like he has to put over the back of it. I was thrilled to get my first sale from somebody that I didn't know. And I actually think that I already had the colors that they wanted, so I started on it right away. I got it done really fast because they purchased the custom listing on February 4th and I shipped it on February 7th. At this point, I was pretty convinced that I was going to make it big, so I went out and bought a bunch more yarn. But I didn't get another sale until August of that year, so like 7 months later. And then I got one more in December, and that was it for 2017. You're probably thinking, how in the heck did you know all those dates? I have the same Etsy account, so I was able to just sort my orders from oldest to newest and found them on there. Otherwise, yeah, I would have no clue what dates that was. I also had a lot of the stuff posted on Instagram, so if I can find pictures, I'll put them up here. In early 2017, I actually moved to Maryland for work. Long story short, they cut my department at the location here. They had a sister location in Maryland that was hiring for the same department, but like one step up. And it was a little bit more pay, so I was like, man, why not? I could have stayed here and moved to a different department because that's what everybody else in my department did, but I'm just impulsive. So like I said a minute ago, at this time I had a boyfriend and he was mooching off of me pretty heavily. And I, of course, didn't really realize it or just thought like that. If you've been there, you know. But deep down, I thought that he maybe wouldn't want to come with me because he never really liked going to new places. So I thought maybe he would just go like help me move in and then like come back here, but to my surprise, he stayed up there. And I let him stay because I was honestly afraid to be alone. The apartment that I had to get, it was the only one that was available and that I could afford. and it was in like a downtown area and not very a nice place at night. I only saw it during the day. I had to park in a parking garage that was 2 blocks away because there was no parking in front of the apartment. And I was glad that he was there to walk me home at night because that was pretty scary. I had a few close calls. But throughout our entire relationship, he never held a job and spent what little money he did make at the few jobs he had on Mountain Dew and cigarettes. So I paid all of the bills. So that didn't last very long, living especially that far away from family. And I racked up quite a bit of debt just trying to pay bills, and then also later had to open another credit card to pay off the lease that I had to break early that he didn't pay a dime for. So we moved back here with our respective families in 2017 and broke up sometime in the summer of 2018. But while I was there, I began thinking about that van life idea that I mentioned earlier. So I had been watching YouTube videos. I somehow stumbled upon one about van life and tiny houses, and I absolutely loved them. My ex did not love them, so mentally he was already like out of the picture. But I was like, wait, I need to like make money if I'm going to do this. Like, how am I going to do that without a job, you know? So one of the ways I was considering making money on the road was selling crochet patterns, because I already knew how to crochet, so I could do that and like blog and all that stuff, because you can do that from anywhere, kind of. But I decided that probably wouldn't work because I wouldn't have space for yarn in a van, and I wouldn't really have anywhere to like take pictures. But I did still try to do the crochet patterns thing and made a blog while I was there. I did write a few patterns while I was there and got better at taking photos of my work. Like, I learned about natural sunlight and, you know, getting good shots of things instead of like just in the dark on the couch. Also, while I was there, I made a YouTube channel and a blog about how to crochet, because that was going to be part of my thing. I was going to make money from all that and be like a crochet influencer. I already had a makeup related channel and a blog for that as well, so I knew kind of how to do things. Around mid 2017, I think the timeline, I'm not 100% sure when this happened, but I changed the name of everything to, I want to say it was in the middle of like me making videos for the YouTube channel, so I would have been in Maryland still. But I changed the name from A Street Crochet to, in a blog post on June 21st, 2017, I made a list of the things that I thought I needed to do or learn before I could become my own boss. I found this in a screenshot on Instagram. The blog has long since been deleted. The very next post on Instagram was advertising my pattern testing and copywriting services on Fiverr. I was pretty determined, though I never got any gigs on Fiverr. I'm glad I left those photos up on Instagram because that was a pretty rough time for me and I don't remember much of it. So in 2018, once I moved back here, I didn't get a new job right away. I couldn't get back into what I was doing at the call center location here, and they didn't have any positions that I wanted, so I just tried really, really hard to make my makeup YouTube and the crochet blogging and stuff work as my job. I think I was uploading 3 to 5 videos a week for my makeup YouTube, doing blogs there, and I took on a couple custom crochet projects like a family's stocking set, a large Afghan, and just kept writing more patterns. Then I discovered that there were people who gave advice on running an Etsy shop and how to do taxes for a small business and stuff like that. So I'm not sure why I didn't seek out that advice before. I guess maybe I did and I found it too overwhelming. So I had opened up that second credit card to buy out my lease, but they approved me for a ridiculous amount, like 5 times as much as I needed to pay off the lease. So I used that to buy even more supplies. And on March 26, 2018, I registered my business with the state of Kentucky. I ran out of my savings after a couple months and started working at a certain religious craft store that shall not be named. And I still kept trying to make crochet work even though I knew it wasn't profitable. And I somehow amassed a metric crap ton of yarn because soon after I started working there, they had a really big clearance sale, and I even went to other locations to buy out their clearance as well because I thought that I was going to make a bunch of stuff and sell it. To this day, I'm still trying to unload all of that yarn and the dozen or so half-finished projects that I started with it. It was actually pretty fun working there, honestly. Aside from the controversial things that came with working for that specific company, I got to travel around and help them set up new store locations, and I racked up quite a chunk of change from the overtime and travel reimbursements. I just knew deep down that I didn't want to be working for someone else forever, and I didn't quite know why. Seemingly unrelated to all of that, sometime around when I was working at that craft store, I saw a video from another makeup YouTuber, and they were talking about reusable cotton rounds, like for makeup remover and facial toner, and I was like, wow, that's genius. So I bought the ones that they recommended because I was using a lot of disposable ones. I found those particular ones to be a bit too small for what I needed, And I was like, you know what? I could probably make my own because I know how to sew. But I didn't have a serger to make that nice finished edge. So serger, if you don't know, is a different kind of sewing machine. Like it does that. If you've seen a shirt with the like loopy thread kind of pattern on it, that's a serger. And they also cut the fabric as it goes around so you can make like a clean, you know, curved line. Sergers on the low end cost around $200. So I was like, I should probably just buy different ones for cheaper than $200. But I just couldn't stop thinking about making my own. And I was interested in making my own clothes as well, so I bit the bullet and ordered a serger. Then I went to a different craft store with my high limit credit card and got some flannel fabric to start testing out the cotton rounds. It took weeks, if not a few months, to get the hang of using the serger because it was pretty difficult compared to a normal sewing machine. And I had to figure out how to get that nice rounded square shape. And my first, I don't even know how many of them looked more like a teardrop shape. I actually still haven't used some of the first ones that I made. They're usable, but they're a bit oddly shaped. I actually found one because I was washing them today. This one, it looks old and grubby, but like, see, it's pointy on the side and kind of like, they're supposed to be a square with rounded edges. So finally I got it close enough. I still had my Etsy shop open that entire time. I don't believe I ever put it on vacation mode even when I moved because orders were so sporadic. So I went ahead and listed my cotton rounds for sale on there, and I think I started with about 4 or 5 different colors or prints. Also, since I had the serger, I went ahead and made some reusable Christmas gift bags. I thought that would be a good eco-friendly alternative thing as well, because the store that I was working at had a bunch of Christmas fabric, and I found a pattern on how to make a reusable bag, and I used the serger to make the edges nice and clean. And I actually sold a couple of those before I ever sold any of the cotton rounds. I'm glad that I actually looked into this because I thought that the cotton rounds came first, but they did not. And actually my dad was the first buyer of the cotton rounds in November 2018 as a Christmas present for my stepmom, and then I got 3 orders for them right in a row in December. Around that time also I stopped making new crochet pieces because it was getting really rough on my hands, so I just tried to sell what I already had made. At this point I was about 3 years into having my Etsy shop open, and I only had less than 20 sales. So in August 2019, again, I was still working at this craft store, and I found myself in a potentially dangerous Tinder date situation. It's a long story. I have a video about this specifically on my personal YouTube channel that I can link below if you're interested. But right when I was dealing with that, at the tail end of it, I got a message from a guy that I used to date in high school and into college. So it was just out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in about 6 years. I agreed to meet up with him for coffee, and that ended up being our second first date. So more about him in a minute. While I was working at the craft store, one of our regular customers in the fabric department was talking about doing craft shows, and I mentioned that I had started a business too. And she was telling me how she traveled almost every weekend to different craft shows to set up with her children's boutique. So later she came in and was asking about my products and if I had a Facebook, and she went on her Facebook right then, looked at the stuff that I had. Then she kind of looked around for a little bit and came back. She was basically like, hey, I know that you had talked about wanting to get started in craft shows, and I think everybody's got to start somewhere. So I am curating an event in October. What do you think about me giving you a space for free so that you can try it out and see what you think? And I was like internally screaming because I had no idea what I was doing, how to do a craft show, how to set up a booth or anything, but I said yes. I was a busy little bee for the next 2 months making new inventory, and I had added some cloth wipes to my product lineup, and I gathered up my Afghans, scarves, and hats and other crochet things. So my friend at the time had a small business and had done craft shows before, so I dragged all my boxes to her house and she helped me figure out a setup. We made it work and managed to fit everything in our 2 cars and put together some makeshift display pieces. So this was just my first event and I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on a fancy display, so we made it work. So this was the first year for this particular event, and it was unfortunately at the same time as another pretty large local craft show, but still a pretty good amount of people showed up and I made some sales. If I had paid for my spot, I would have made back my booth fee plus maybe $100 or so. I think that's a pretty good success for my first time. While I was there, the vendor across from me was a local soap store called Oregonia Soapworks. They came over to my booth and asked about my cotton rounds and asked if I would wholesale them. Thankfully, I had the foresight to work wholesale into my pricing, so I said yes. And I gave them a pack to try out and see if they liked it. And about a month later, they emailed me and ordered 30 packs. Just a side note, I didn't realize until like just a couple months ago that they had tried to email me on my A Street Crochet email which was still attached to my Facebook, but I obviously stopped looking at once I changed the email. So, oops, I'm glad they realized that it was the wrong address. So at that time I was sleeping, doing my makeup videos, and doing my sewing and everything out of my bedroom. And it was so cramped and crowded, like there was just a mountain of things on the floor, like behind the desk. I couldn't get to the closet to put clothes away, so I had my clothes all piled on the floor. It was a mess. So it seems like a lifetime ago, but this room that I'm in right now used to be my brother's room. So he moved into the basement in the end of 2019, and I was able to take this room as my bedroom. And then I took what used to be my bedroom and used that for my office, which I did a whole like clean out room tour thing. I'll link it below. But that was a game changer for everything. Like as soon as I did that, the ball started rolling. I don't think I would have been able to grow as fast as I was about to grow if I had still been trying to do everything from that one room. So after that craft show, I was determined to finally take the business seriously. And the lady that I met working at the craft store that hosted the craft show really helped me a lot over the next year or so. And I remember one time she told me that if you want to make this your full-time thing, then you gotta hustle. And I took that to heart because I was like, oh, this is somebody who is basically doing what I want to be doing, so I should probably listen. So right away I started looking at more craft shows to do because that one went pretty well. And I had a bunch lined up that I wanted to apply for, but it was like, that was around the holiday time, so they weren't really, like usually craft shows start putting out like applications in the late winter. So I had a bunch that I had written down that I was going to apply for. So remember the date that I talked about a minute ago? Well, at this point we were getting pretty serious and we're planning to get married, and still are planning to get married. He ended up enlisting in the military in January 2020, and I was doing all the research to figure out how I can make the most money from doing my shop, and I began working on a Shopify website in February and did all new listing photos and got new stuff to put on there. Lots and lots of work. It took, I spent the equivalent of a second full-time job working on the Shopify. So we knew my fiance was going to be leaving for basic training soon, and he was going into active duty. So we had no idea where he was going to be stationed, because usually training and usually the entire training process for his MOS or his job in particular might have taken like maybe 6 months. We had tried to get married before he left, but that didn't really pan out. So we were going to plan on getting married when he came back, and then I would move to wherever he was going to be stationed. And I also thought it would be best if I was self-employed or like a digital nomad like I was discussing earlier, because I didn't really want to deal with having to find a new job every single time he moved, which would be like every year or two. So remember how I said at the beginning to be careful what you ask for? Well, I wanted to be self-employed and traveling, so here we go. So at that time, at the beginning of 2021, I was, and still am, living with my parents, and my bills were relatively small. I had saved up quite a bit from working those extra jobs, like doing the new store setups. Like I made thousands extra, like sometimes $3,000 to $4,000 per time, like on top of my normal pay. So I still had the debt from before, but I had some expenses saved up because that was more important for me to get my business kickstarted, and then I could worry about paying off the debt later. Because basically it was now or never. This was my chance. I had to make it work. So I had taken a photo of the 2 weeks notice that I had written to my boss at this unnamed craft store, and it was dated February 24th, 2020. And I actually worked my remaining entire 2 weeks. So my last day was Friday, March 6th, 2020. Yep, that March 6th, 2020, that day. And of course I stayed friends with the people that I worked with, and they were all saying how basically from that point on, for several months throughout the entire, well, I guess it's still happening, but throughout the Panini Press season 1, I should say, it was an unholy nightmare working there. Because like first they were going to close down, then they didn't want to close down, and then they tried to say they were essential, but then they weren't essential, and they wouldn't enforce the mask mandate. Nobody was getting unemployment payments for months. It was a disaster. Then I was scared to death because I was like, oh, literally everyone is getting laid off from work, and how am I going to make money? And like, what if I need to go back to work? I can't because there are no jobs. So anyways, I had no earthly idea what was about to happen. So we had just taken a family trip to Vegas for my stepdad's work. at the beginning of February, which was super fun. I had never been farther west than, I think, Texas somewhere for a layover when I was flying somewhere else. While we were traveling to and from Vegas, there were a few people wearing N95 masks. And by the time we got back from that trip, like middle of February, well, it was only a few days long, so it was still like kind of the beginning of February. Everyone at work was given hand sanitizer to carry around and instructions to clean more than usual. And we were all kind of like staying away from each other in the break room because we didn't know anything at that point. We didn't know that like how it was spread or what was really happening. So my last day at that job was March 6th. So I hustled my bustle and got my Shopify store open on March 13th. And according to an Instagram post that I made at that time, I was planning on switching completely over to Shopify. I'm very, very, very glad that did not happen because that would have been a disaster, which I'll get to explaining why in a minute. To my surprise, actually my best-selling product at that time was cloth wipes because of the toilet paper and subsequent baby wipe shortage. And that pushed me into 100 sales on Etsy. And yes, I went full-time with less than 100 sales. So this next part, if I had titles for these sections, would be called Trial by Fire. If I want a snack break, I got some orange slices. So in late March, there was a big push to support small businesses because we were really struggling. And I was accepted into a virtual craft show and I was able to advertise my shop, and I met quite a few fellow small business owners through that, and that was really helpful. Aside from the slight upswing in cloth wipes, I was terrified because people were losing their jobs or being laid off by the millions. And I was like, oh my gosh, who is gonna care about eco-friendly stuff when they don't even have money for food, you know? So like I couldn't blame people for not buying things because, you know, there's more important things to buy when you don't have any income. Then at the end of March, I think around the end of March, this was when hospitals were running out of PPE, masks and gloves and all that stuff, and they were begging for donations. And there was like this big Facebook group called Mask for Nurses, and I was a part of that and I was thinking about it. But then I got a message from a former coworker who had a lot of connections to people, and a little birdie told him that the CDC was about to announce that they would be recommending masks. And literally there were no masks to be had anywhere. You could not order them, you could not go to the store and buy them. Hospitals couldn't even get a hold of them just because of the insane demand, and also because of supply chain disruptions from the virus, people catching the virus. So people were turning to the sewing community to get masks. So I started making prototypes. I found a sewing pattern for one. Like, kudos to the YouTubers who made mask sewing patterns in March of 2020. They got millions of views and probably raking in the dough from AdSense. So I found a pattern and tweaked it a little bit to what would be easier for me to mass produce. Kind of, sort of. I wasn't really thinking about mass producing at that time, but I tweaked it a little bit, like throughout the whole, like from then until now, it's changed drastically. So I started making prototypes for them. I tested it out myself, had my fiance try one on, because he was still here at that time, I think he left in April. I can't remember. Like from this point up until maybe a few months ago is a blur. So I made 4 for my coworker and his wife, and then he asked me for some more because his neighbor wanted some. And he offered to, like, I didn't know how much to charge, and he just offered to pay me $10 a piece. And I was like, okay. And then almost immediately, like overnight, I was bombarded, isn't even an accurate word for this. I was bombarded with requests for masks. Medical professionals needed them for work because they couldn't get any from their hospital or doctor's offices. First responders needed them because they couldn't get any either. And people were begging for donations of masks, of supplies, of anything. Stores were out of fabric and elastic. People were cutting up their bed sheets to use the elastic and the fabric out of the sheets, like I suppose new sheets, but still, that was the most overwhelming experience of my life. So a little bit prior, my grandma had given me a bunch of cotton fabric that she bought for quilts that she was trying to get rid of. And I had some from my personal stash that I use as well. From working at the craft store, I got a bunch on clearance. So I made a dozen or so different prints of masks. And elastic was nowhere to be found. I eventually found some jewelry cord that kind of worked, but it wasn't as easy to stretch, like it was pretty hard. But that was all that I could find. And for about 6 months there, orders of fabric or elastic, thread, or anything like that were taking months to ship, if they even had any stock to begin with. So I just used what I had and tried to get as much elastic as I could. I started out selling them to friends and family on Facebook through my business Facebook page because I had so many requests from people that I knew. I did not have time to even try to list them on my Shopify or my Etsy yet. I was very hesitant and waited perhaps a bit too long to list them on Etsy, like I really missed the bag there. But I didn't want to do that because I knew I would get more orders than I could handle. And that fear was very, very rational. It was also nerve-wracking for me personally because I obviously wanted to help as much as I could. And there were not any, like it was too early at this point for any studies to be done on the efficacy of cloth masks. Now it's all good, but it was scary. But all hours of the day and night, I am not even exaggerating, I would get messages from friends of friends wanting to order some masks or asking if I had certain colors or prints. I didn't even really have time to sit down and try to perfect my pattern and get it to where I can make them more efficiently because I had so many orders and I sold quite a few with elastic that was way too short. And I had never really worn one for a long period of time myself because I was obviously staying at home as much as I could. And eventually I had to wear one for an hour or so because I needed to get my tire repaired. My car tire had a flat, so I had to sit there in the car or the tire shop and I was sweating because I was sitting there with a mask. And I mean, everybody else had one on too, but I was like, oh my God. But I noticed it was digging into my ears, so I was like, oh, maybe this elastic is too short. And then finally somebody that had bought some was like, hey, can you make these elastic a little bit longer? I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So eventually I did manage to get them listed on my Shopify at least. And I just put them on there as like one listing with color options instead of trying to make like separate listings for each one. That was a little bit faster. And that really helped to streamline the order process, even though a lot of them were just local pickups, but still I could see like exactly which ones I had ordered instead of trying to keep up on Facebook messages. But all the while during the whole mask thing, like especially at the very beginning, I was still getting about one order a day on Etsy. And eventually I got the mask listed there in May. I had a buy one, give one deal going on with the masks and I ended up donating, I think 70 to our local hospital. But I quickly had to move on to donating a portion of proceeds because I physically could not make that many and I was running out of supplies. So every day I'd listen to the governor's daily address telling about the, what progress they'd made and how many cases and all that stuff. And I was just listening while I was making the masks, trying really hard to stave off having a panic attack and not able to unglue myself from my phone. And actually I was wondering like if I was overreacting during that time, but actually I know quite a few people who made masks also and they said the same thing. So once I had them listed on Etsy, my sales exploded. The culmination of learning how Etsy worked, finally knowing how to make a good listing, how to get good photos, having a trending search item, having a one-day processing time, which greatly contributed to my stress, but also helped my sales. And that Etsy sales domino effect, where if you sell one thing, then you sell a bunch more. That all catapulted my shop into success. So I'll put a screenshot of my Etsy stats for last year up here, just so you can see exactly what I mean by catapulted. That jump in March was because of the cloth wipes, but then everything else was masks and subsequent effects from masks. So I actually removed the masks from my shop, or like turned them off. What do you call that? I deactivated them. That's what I did. Deactivated them in June because I just couldn't keep up, and I kept them on my Shopify because sales were a little bit slower there and I couldn't get my hands on enough elastic. I finally found a wholesale supplier of elastic that was able to keep me stocked, but that was a trip. So I added them back in July and got over 5 sales a day in July. And my overall, this is the most insane part. My overall conversion rate for 2020 was 5.1%. Most shops would kill for 2%. I was getting 5.1%. This was on top of almost 100 orders on Shopify, which are almost all at least 4 masks, if not more, per order. And also locals that paid in cash, like ordering through Facebook. So the boost from making the masks brought all of my other products up as well, because if you sell a lot and get a lot of good reviews, then that increases your overall shop's like quality score and boost up your other products. And then also people who found my masks took a look at my shop and found other things as well. I have a lot of repeat customers of non-masks because of this. They started out ordering a mask and found other things. Guys, this still isn't over. This is gonna be the longest video I've ever made. Oh my gosh. But I just want to like include everything because this is such a wild story. So although 2020 was one big panic attack, especially with the added stress of my fiance being gone and the uncertainty around that. I managed to use that momentum to keep the shop going even when mask sales dropped off, like when they started becoming available or when they decided to not make them mandatory anymore, which was... So there are a lot of things that I would have done differently, and I could have made even more sales, but I was just so focused on getting them out as quickly as I could, and I had absolutely zero help with any of this. My best estimate is that I have made over 2,000 masks to date, and about 1,900 of them were last year. I was able to add in a few products in the midst of all the masks with the increased revenue, and I did a couple of small farmers market events and sold lots of masks at those as well. I added reusable spork and straw pouches in July and biodegradable scrunchies in August. And then I did a huge outdoor craft show in October. That was like the first one around here since 2019. And I did over a month's worth of sales in one day, which was amazing. It was a 2-day thing, but it got rained out like right at the beginning of the second day, so I could have made a lot more, but that's okay. It was worth it. In September of 2020, I closed my Shopify. It was only really bringing in sales from people who I had already sold masks to. So I redirected my domain to my Etsy. That way when people typed it in, they would still get to my shop and not an invalid URL. I was posting regularly to social media at this time and doing pretty well, gaining followers, but it wasn't enough traction to my Shopify to pay the subscription fee as well as, other fees, and not enough to justify keeping it open, I should say. And it was also a pain to keep track of the items on both places. I know there are apps to do that, and I have ShipStation, which does that as well, but I never figured it out. It was just too much at the time. I was so busy with the mask, so I was like, I'll just figure that out later. But also part of what I would have done differently was that I was just kind of holding back, I think, because my fiance was supposed to be out of training around October-ish, and we didn't know, I didn't want to be doing a lot of extra work that would just be pointless. He ended up getting sent straight overseas out of training. He never got to come home. They just kind of shipped him off straight there because they wanted the flights and everything to be sterile, and if they were kind of in a sterile environment on the base, so if he would have went back into civilian world, then he would have gotten exposed to the virus and then shipped off to another country. That just would have been a whole mess, so they went ahead and just shipped everybody off without having to come home. So he moved to an entire different country without coming home to get any of his personal belongings. So we were just waiting to see if he would get put overseas or come to the States. It would be almost impossible to move the business overseas because it would cost more than my inventory and supplies and stuff are worth to ship them. And getting registered to run a business in another country as a foreign national, that did not seem worth it for only a year. So I had been waiting to make any big moves or reopen my Shopify until we knew where he was going to be going. And up until pretty recently, we kind of thought there might be a chance that I would be able to join him in the country that he's in. So I've just been putting all my energy into growing my Etsy shop and also this channel to help others with Etsy as well. I've been filming for so long the sun's about to go down. We're nearing the end, I promise. Yet another wrench in the machine was that I noticed I had significant difficulty working from home. It's not the social aspect because I really enjoy being by myself, but I was so happy to not have anybody telling me what to do, but also I needed somebody to tell me what to do because I just didn't do anything if I didn't have that. I was also unaware of how much time was passing. I would think 5 minutes was all day, or 8 hours was only 10 minutes, stuff like that. And I had at this point all of the knowledge and the tools to get myself to a 6-figure business. And I also knew how I could grow my makeup YouTube and blog, which I revamped in 2020 as well. So that was also part of my plan to try to make money while being location independent. But I just found myself falling short of what I thought was my potential. And day after day, I would just be so frustrated with myself. Other people have done this and made lots of money from their blogs and from YouTube and their Etsy shops, and I was like, what's wrong with me? I know all these things, why can't I do them? So I started mentioning this to my mom, who had been diagnosed with ADHD for several years, I think almost 10. And she said, you might want to look into getting tested for ADHD. I was like, no, I'm not hyper like she was when she was younger or like my brother, no way. And then I started realizing that I was or am hyperactive, but in my brain. I always feel like I'm 20 steps ahead of everybody else, and I don't necessarily need time to think about things. They just boom, like it's all there. And I have trouble focusing on something if I'm not particularly interested in it. Around this time, I had made a TikTok, and of course your TikTok For You page knows more about you than you do. And I immediately got served ADHD related videos. I had lived with my mom and brother both for the vast majority of my life, except for that 1 year where I lived on my own. And I thought that all of those things were normal, but apparently they're not. Then I started seeing videos about autism and comorbid ADHD and autism. And I was more hesitant to look into that because I held on to these ableist beliefs that I couldn't possibly be autistic. But I'd also repressed a lot of my memories from childhood that had forced me into masking my autistic traits. And those have slowly started coming back. But I was like, holy freaking crap. This is why I have a hard time doing things. And I have rejection sensitive dysphoria and sensory aversions to sound and smell, which made working in retail a living nightmare. Because I knew like instantly when I started working from home, my stress level basically was gone until the mask thing, but you know. So earlier this year in 2021, I went for a diagnosis, and I had imposter syndrome throughout the whole thing. They gave me a self-assessment and also a computer test to test my attention span. And after taking that assessment, and they told me not to score myself on the assessment, but I did anyways, and the scoring range that I was in the like suggests severe difficulty range. So after I took both of those tests, the imposter syndrome fell off, and I was like, there is no way they are not going to diagnose me with ADHD. A month or so later, I got diagnosed with ADHD and an autism-related disorder called social communication disorder, which I kind of disagree with based on some of the reasons that they gave, but it's not really worth going for a second opinion. Social communication disorder is essentially the new term for Asperger's, which isn't really used anymore. And the only thing an official, like formal paper diagnosis for autism is good for an adult is like work accommodations, which I don't need because I am self-employed. And some autistic people would qualify for a disability, but again, I don't particularly need that. And I can give myself all of the accommodations that I need because I'm the boss. But a formal diagnosis for ADHD meant that I could begin medication. So I started medication a little over a month ago, and it was a bit rocky at first, but I'm pretty okay with it now. It took a while to get kind of leveled off. Now I've been able to get a lot more work done, and I'm putting into action all of the things that I knew I needed to do that would help my business grow, and it's been paying off. So with my fiance hopefully coming home in 3 or 4 months and quickly approaching holiday season, I've been working on overdrive. Right now I'm kind of at that tipping point, or the fine line between reinvesting in the business and taking a profit. From the outside, it does sound like I've had a lot of success over the last year and a half or so. And with my mask sales last year and the stimulus checks, I was able to pay off all of the debt from my last relationship. And my meager student loan, that was about $6,000 left I had to pay, which was a huge burden off of my shoulders to not have to pay that every month. And I have been able to reinvest even more into the business now that those are paid off. But now it's crunch time to start pulling more profit and saving up. While I was worried about not being able to bring Cruelty-Free Stitchery to another country, I began considering other forms of income as well, and briefly did digital planners under this name, Type 9 Studio. I made a few sales from that, but scrapped it in favor of starting this more educational style content, with the possibility of doing digital downloads down the road or making money through ads on my videos here or the blog that I haven't finished yet. I was prepared to close down entirely if it came to it, but I have worked so hard to build the brand and numerous product lines, so that would be a last resort. It is smart in any situation to have multiple streams of income. My main source of income right now is Etsy, and I do have a few people that I wholesale to, but it's not like super regular. But my passion is helping people with their Etsy shops like others have helped me. And I definitely have a hate-hate relationship with planners as a person with ADHD. So this route kind of made more sense to do like the Etsy tips. I found myself spending a lot of time on Reddit and other forums giving Etsy advice for free. So I thought, why not build up this knowledge for even more people to see and learn from and put it on my own platform. So that's where I am today. If you're thinking about starting a small business or an Etsy shop, just do it. I can't imagine where I would be today if I had waited to start mine, despite only having a handful of sales in the first 3 years. Though I'd probably not suggest jumping ship on your day job like I did without even having 100 sales, so. This video is long enough. I appreciate you if you stayed till the end. I will give you a cookie if I could. And if you stayed until the end and you are interested in Etsy and small business, or just are interested in how that works. If you don't actually have one yourself, then I would suggest you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss my future videos. Links to everywhere else that you can find me online are in the description box, as well as a link to my Etsy shop. So if you have questions about anything that I talked about or just want to know more about something, let me know in the comments. I will do a Q&A if I get enough questions. The main takeaway here is that I and many others on Etsy did not immediately get success. Like, it took me 3.5 years and a global pandemic to have success on Etsy. So, but that's also partially my own fault because I didn't really research how to do it. So if you're looking up Etsy videos on YouTube, you're already a step ahead of me. I will see you guys in the comments. Goodbye.